Hello and welcome to Psych319, Chapter 3, Part 1. This is Sensation, Perception, and Attention. We'll be focusing mostly on attention. I want you to take a brief look at this movie here and see if you notice anything weird about it. Okay, what you might not have noticed is actually, you'll have to go back and replay it, of course, sorry about that, but there were actually a lot of changes there. Not only was the outfit made a lot of people realize, oh, the guy was wearing a different shirt or so on and so forth, but a lot of people missed the fact that it was a totally different individual. Um, Now I want you to also pay attention to this movie. There'll be two women. One will be giving directions and one will be receiving directions. I want you to pay very close attention to the woman asking for directions. She's wearing glasses and she's on the left. It'll take a little while for this to start. Okay, there she is on the left with a map asking for directions. Pay close attention to her. Okay. Did you notice a change? If not, go try again. In actuality, uh, there was a very dramatic change to the other woman. So I want you to go back and pay attention to the other woman, the one who's giving directions, and see if you notice any differences. You probably missed some very alarming things, but maybe when you went back and checked, you caught some of your mistakes there. Well, what's the big picture? We're often unaware of the demands of it placed on our perception and visual systems. We're processing an enormous amount of information, and that processing is under the control of attention. We assume we have an infinite ability to process information, but we don't. We have a limited ability, and so we have to direct our attention in order to decide what to pay attention to in the environment. So we operate very much under illusion that we can do multiple things at once, that we're processing all the information, and that we don't commit any errors, but that's a huge illusion. If you go to the dictionary and you look up a definition of attention, you're going to get some standard definition like this. And our common everyday use of the word attention is actually very different from the scientific use of the word, and so I urge you um, to take that into consideration when you think about all concepts in psychology, because we tend to use everyday language in psychology, and it's very confusing because a lot of stuff has very precise definitions. And to highlight that example, I want you to think of the other types of definitions. We consider these operational definitions of attention, they're working definitions of attention that are more precise than what you would find in the dictionary. So for example, vigilance, when you think of being awake and alert and attentive in class, when you're falling asleep in class, you're not very vigilant, and that's one form of attention. Another might be feature-based. I want you to take a look around your room, and I want you to see if you can find something that's blue. Now, in this process, you might have noticed that everything that is blue in the room sort of jumped out at you. Now pay attention to everything that's red. So now everything that's red jumps at you, and you have the ability to not only attend to particular people or things in the world, but to specific features. So, the common need for this, the reason we evolved to have this sort of thing, is if you can think about trying to find your friend in a crowd where they're wearing a red shirt and blue jeans. Obviously, the ability to focus on different features is incredibly important to us. I'm going to skip over this definition, but you can look it up. It's another formal definition, object-based attention. Spatial-based attention is something we're going to be focusing quite a bit on. When you're paying attention to one particular location, let's say the slides that you're looking at now, you can see this stuff at high resolution. Now, without moving your eyes away from the computer screen, sort of start to pay attention to anything that's going on way in your peripheral vision. Okay, that stuff has always been there, and it's always been creating an image on your retina, but you haven't been paying attention to it. And now that you are, you might notice some changes. Like right now, I can notice some movement outside my window as I look down at the traffic below in the streets of Manhattan. Um, and then we say it's modality specific. So right now, you're paying attention to maybe my words or the images you see on the screen or the honking of the taxi that's leaking through the audio here. Now I want you to pay attention to perhaps maybe the sound of the air conditioner or the pressure that your shirt is putting on your back. Those sensations have always been there, but you never noticed them because you weren't paying attention to it. So attention can be modality specific. It can be specific to a particular sense, touch, smell, sight, sound, etc. It also seems to be necessary to convert sensations to perception. So you weren't paying attention to the pressure your shoes were putting on your feet until I directed your attention to that, and now you have the perception of that. Then selective invited attention, which we'll be coming to. There's many different definitions, so you can see why you don't want to just rely on a very casual definition of what attention is. So let's start off with selective attention. We're not going to cover all of these things, but I want to allude to the very important ones, and selective attention is a huge one in psychology. And this is basically the ability to pay attention to one part of the visual scene or one thing at the expense of all others. And some of the early demos of this you can experience yourself. I'm not going to go through it right now, but the cool thing about having an online class is you can experience all these things for yourself. So in the slides without audio, I want you to go find this slide and then click, put on some headphones. You have to do this with headphones. You can't use the computer speakers. And I want you to make sure you have the left and the right earphones aligned properly with your computer. And I want you to pay attention to the number of times I say the word the in the left ear. There's going to be speech in both ears, and I want you to count for each one of these trials how many times I say the word the. Make a note of it, and then come back to this slide. Okay, so now that you're back, and hopefully you actually participated in this experiment, I'm not going to give you the answer, but you might have noticed that there is some that you might have counted, I don't know how many, 7, 8 does. I don't really care what the actual answer was. The truth was there was a lot of stuff going on in the unattended channel in the right ear. And if you were paying really good attention and doing the task very well, you probably counted a large number of the word thes. You probably got a good word count, but you might have missed some of the stuff that's going on in the opposite channel. And that's the essence of selective attention. By paying attention to one particular thing, you do that you enhance processing for whatever that thing is, but you do that at the expense of anything else in the environment that would be attended to. And an early theory of how attention works was formed by Broadbent in 1958. Again, the processing of one stream of information at the expense of other streams. And the task I just showed you is called the dichotic listening task. It's a very good way of experiencing that. So subjects typically shadow speech, meaning that they repeat the speech in one ear and ignore speech in the other. I just had you listen. Subjects are later tested on both streams, and it turns out that people can process very, very low-level changes in the unattended ear, like a change in pitch. If you do a radical change in the unattended ear, they'll notice, but not sophisticated ones like changes in language or backward speech sometimes, or certainly meaning. If I slip in a secret message in the unattended channel like I did in that demo I gave you, you probably missed it. So there's the idea of filter theory. This is also called early selection theory. And it proposes that we block out all unattended information based on physical properties, and filtered information never gets processed. So the idea that if you're paying attention to something in the left ear and the right ear, if you decide that you want to pay attention to something in the left ear, you'll ignore everything in the right ear no matter what. So we're saying that a bottleneck occurs in attention. And the question is whether it occurs very early or very late. So according to the early selection theory, You have some perceptual input, and you attend to that. And that, because you're attending to that, it makes it all the way through to semantic meaning and analysis. This like high-level processing. You start to pay attention to it. You can perceive what it is. You can make judgments and decisions based on whatever that perceptual stimulus is. Now, according to early selection theory, if you're not attending to a particular channel, it gets blocked before you can analyze it for meaning and content. So try and think about how that applies to the task I just gave you in the dichotic listening task. Now, a problem came up with a later study that found you can actually process some information in the unattended channel. This is called the cocktail party effect. Now imagine yourself at a crowded cocktail party, and this has probably happened to you. And then you hear your name, and you turn your head. You said somebody was calling your name, and that made it through the early filter. So this sort of contradicts the early selection or the early attenuation theory here. So it's saying that at some level, the unintended stream is processed for content and meaning. And if you think about how heavy this is, that means that on some level, does that mean we're paying attention to every single conversation at a cocktail party? Are we listening to everything and then decide only to pay attention to it later if it suits our needs, like if we hear our name or something like that? And that's a very, very heavy bit of information. That means we must have an enormous ability to pay attention to a large number of things. But there are other possibilities, like maybe we're rapidly switching between the attended and an unattended channel, and occasionally we drop in on the unattended channel just to see if there's anything interesting to pay attention to. The other idea is that maybe late selection, everything is processed, and that we decide maybe later whether it's worthy of making an action upon. So according to the late selection theory, both information in the attended and ignored channels get processed at the perceptual level. They make it all the way up to the level of meaning and analysis, and then a filter is imposed. So you might decide to hear every conversation in the room, but only listen to the one that you're interested in and filter everything else. But that's made after you've done some type of low-level perceptual analysis on that. It's a very interesting idea. So I want you to do one more dichotic listening demo and try this one out. And I want you again to do the same task. Do your best to pay attention to the left ear and count how many times you hear the word the. And then come back to the slide, report back after your experience, and tell me what you noticed. So hopefully you came back and you might have noticed some interesting things you should have attended to the left ear, but you might have noticed some interesting changes in the right ear. The reason is if there were physical changes to the stimulus, it could break through that filter and catch your attention, then you could process it for meaning. Okay, I have to stop here because I'm out of time, so we'll continue in the next slide, or the next movie.